Well, as we get into our book feature, remember that you can share your thoughts on some of the books that you're currently reading, have read, or those you'd like to read. All you have to do is send us an email, a tweet, an Instagram with a picture, and of course a relevant caption of your pick of the week, your must read for 2017, your current read. Let us know what it is. Well, I know what I'll be currently reading, and I'll be telling you just about it in a little moment. It's called The Inside Out. Well, I'll tweet it on @MorningLiveSABC. You do the same. Use the hashtag MorningLiveSABC or Instagram us using the handle @MorningLiveSABC, or simply email morninglive@sabc.co.za. Well, after the successful release of his debut novel, the Raft, creative strategist and writer Fred Strydom is back with yet another thrilling and genius book that he entitled The Inside Out Man, my current read. This read follows the life of a jazz pianist called Bent and how his life plans get entangled in a wicked web of Leonard Fry, a wealthy and eccentric jazz music fan. Strydom's effortless use of language and imagination takes the reader on a psychological euphoria with every turn of the page. Fred Strydom is here with me in studio to unpack this new read. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thanks very much.
I was looking at the back here at some of the reviews on this book. This one, which was from the Cape Times, says every character, every leaf, every strange fruit, every odd island is magnificently described. A brilliant book.
So I think those reviews, it's praise for the previous book.
Your previous book.
And then on the front we've got the review for this one.
Yes, but what are you expecting from this
one?
Book?
It's such a different book from the first book. And, you know, the first book had multiple characters and multiple locations set all over the world. And you know, when you write a second book, you've always left with the choice. Are you going to try and write something that compares to your first book? And then you'll always have people either decide it's better or worse. And I decided that I wasn't even going to go that route, and that I was going to do something completely different. So after all those characters, all those locations, I wrote about 3 people in one house in the countryside. So I went as far left field as I could from the first book, and it's a very psychological story. There's a little bit of Hitchcock in there. It's a what they call them, a chamber thriller. You know, it's a kind of a psychological cat and mouse between characters that are in a very confined location. And the story just kind of ramps and builds, and hopefully there's a nice big payoff for the reader in the end.
And tell us about creating those characters, what you had in mind, and if they've lived up to those expectations in the book, in the story.
That's a great question. Some of your characters, you know who they're going to be, and you try and write them the way you imagine them. And then some of your characters, as you write them, they kind of reveal themselves to you. I'm not somebody who thinks about every detail of the plot before I get writing. So there's an idea about what needs to happen. And my main character in there, about halfway through the book, he has to do something very despicable. But you have to write a character that people can still empathize with, and that they can still like in some way. So in order the journey of trying to create a character that's likable and that the reader can empathize with, to get that character to a point where he does something despicable, that's probably the trickiest thing, because you can't do things that go against the character's nature. So you spend time with your character, and you get to know them really well, and then eventually somewhere along the book they just take a life of their own, and then they're in cruise control, and you're reading what they're going to do as much as the reader's reading it, and at the end they're done, and you're left with them, and sometimes you miss them, and sometimes you're glad that they're not in your life anymore.
Do you take the characters with you, like everywhere you go, when you're in the writing process, or do you just sort of put them away in a box until you start writing again? How does it work for you?
It's it was such a dark book to write, and I realized that I took 2 years to write it, so I realized I couldn't stay in that dark space over 2 years, because I have a life and a wife and a child and a job and friends and whatnot. So I learned to compartmentalize my writing from the rest of my life, and it's the only way. It's kind of a survival tactic, I guess. So yes, I do spend time with my characters. When I'm with them, I'm with them. And when I'm not with them, I kind of separate myself. It's kind of like when you're with a group of friends, you aren't hanging out with your family in your head at the same time, I suppose. And you try to do the same thing with your characters.
So tell us, the Inside Out, man.
Yeah.
Is there a sequel that you're planning, maybe a movie adaptation, or are you just that author that's just always going to write books and just let them sit nicely in
just
our
lined
palms,
up on my
just,
shelf?
You know, yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, my love is for storytelling. So whether that's storytelling in book form, play form, film form, song form, it doesn't really matter all too much. I think there's an incredible amount of freedom with writing a novel. I do have a love of film, but of course it takes, a team and a crew and a budget and all kinds of things. With a book, you're completely free to do whatever